So you heard this one before, fight or flight mode. So many Canadians are hitting that wall and they have to decide what to do next. So we'll get into that in sections and we'll talk about both options. So for many years, Canadians did fight because it made sense. But I believe personally we got to the point of no return, and we'll talk about that as well. I'll share a couple of stories that are currently happening right now. One is in Grand Bend, one is Niagara Falls, one is locally here in Etobicoke, right near Toronto. So getting into this psychological moment that people will have to decide whether they continue to fight, looking at the trajectories, the graphs, the feeling of what is happening, and they still have to decide whether it is worth it to stay in these properties and fight continuously, even though they see losses on monthly or quarterly or annual basis, or take the flight, take less of a loss today than taking the loss maybe next year or 3 years from today or 5 years out, right? So these are the conversations that I have been having on daily basis. However, when it comes to the fight mode, and I believe that many sellers are going through the fight mode. They're in the market as we speak right now, and they're fighting against themselves. Regardless what you show them graphs, you show them stats, you show them variety, you do comparables, you compare their property to somebody else's property that is better, bigger, nicely situated on a street or community. Regardless of that fight mode is still present. And the bottom line, so let me call it the total of thought for them is, I don't want to lose money. And I said, okay, I get it. But what's the psychology or philosophy behind your pattern? I mean, you don't like to lose money. Great. Nobody likes to lose. But how are we justifying that? You see what I'm saying? And the story, let's start with Grand Bend, right? So the story, in a nutshell, those properties were selling for 1.5. Okay, don't get me wrong, beautiful, but we're also talking peak. Okay, so where is it at now? If we were lucky, I don't know, 1.1, 1.15. On a bad day, maybe a million, right? On a good day, maybe 1.2. But let's call an average of $1.1 million, right? So now, having that on table, how can we justify the difference if the market has been nosediving for a long time? And other agents had inquiries, they were sending verbal offers, which don't mean anything, but people are talking, right? Like agents are speaking to one another and whatnot. And the question always arises, how can we justify the difference from the peak of 1.5 to 1.1? Like the property should be at 1 million to 1.1 million in order to see some kind of an action. So I think the sellers are still in that mindset of owning something physically, like a home. Technically, they're not owning it that. What they owe is money. Like the debt factor there is like through the roof. They owe more than it's worth, and they owe more to the bank than they can afford. So there's two sections to this story, and both are completely negative. So looking at that, I'm like it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you will lose you will belly up and you will not own a property on top of that. So now they're fighting. And what I don't understand, what are they hoping for? What are they actually fighting for? Like, I get it, like to have the property, or to continue to be in that property, which is costing them an arm and a leg. We cannot recoup that money. They cannot recoup that money, no matter what they do. So it's that fight till the last man standing, and the last man standing will be the bank, right? Because that's how the cookie will crumble at the end of the day, right? So that's one. The other property is Niagara Falls, and they have been, you know, shifting and selling, and there's like new builds involved and all of that stuff, and they're trying to uh, sell everything and kind of sum it all up and put it in one property. Great plan, right? I agree, and I think it makes sense. However, all these properties were bought near peak, at peak, and some of them are still pending, which is the new build. So if you take that formula into consideration, every time they sell, they will lose. It's as simple as that, okay? Now the fight mode kicks in, and they're like, listen, I cannot keep selling and keep losing, because I need, hear me out for a second, I need the money to buy something else. So it's kind of like a given. It's like they're privileged that they have to sell at a loss, but they don't want to sell it at a loss that they lose. They want to sell a little bit at a loss so they still gain, which we cannot justify. The market just does not justify at period, okay? So, and every single sector they will lose, and they will be lucky if they somehow manage to have a small down payment to buy a semi-decent townhouse. And I'm saying maybe 20%, like maybe 10% even, right? So just analyzing it all, I'm like, well, okay, so this is the scenario. You will lose money and that's it. And they're like, no, we're not ready. And we will fight. So it's just like I'm scratching my head. I'm like, maybe they know something I don't know. But will the market turn the better in a quarter, 6 months, a year? Probably not, right? So let's go into case number 3, which is Etobicoke, Central Etobicoke, great area, fantastic, right? And obviously back in the day, which there's definitely truth to that, right? They have been stepping from a entry-level property into a detached home in Etobicoke, Central Etobicoke, fine. Great. And that agent at that time promised, acknowledged, said so many things that these folks remembered. And I said, what did he say? And they said, well, look, Etobicoke can never go down. That's number one. I said, everything can go down, right? Manhattan can go down. Never mind Etobicoke. What's next? Then you buy a detached home, it's bulletproof. It's not. Nothing is bulletproof. No matter what, condo, semi, detached, commercial, you name it, nothing. There's always a risk factor involved. Now we can get into details of what's better, worse, what they build more of, what they don't build at all, and all of that stuff. Fine. And the third is like you buy this in this location, this community never goes down. I said, the word never is stupid, because what do you mean never? Every community has its weak spots and some good spots. And some communities tend to keep the value more than others, which is true. Historically has been proven to be true. But to be bulletproof and not lose money, period, that's nonsense. So now we're dealing with a property that has not been renovated, that has been sitting there, that's asking the price of the peak price. And the reason is, I said, okay, so what's the idea behind all of this? And they said, well, if we sell at this price, which is technically the peak price, uh, we can maybe walk out, with a little bit of profit, not much, and that's fine. I said, okay, but it's not gonna happen. Like, you're like $300,000 off the price, and it will not sell. Some people will walk through. You might help others sell the home that are properly priced, because your house, it's not that great and it's overpriced, and everybody else will look so much better and they will have an advantage. That's just how it works. And she said, well, but I'm being very optimistic and realistic. I said, okay, because I'm just asking for this, because then I can walk out. I said, lady, like, this is not a wish list. Like, if the property is listed at 1.59, almost 1.6, and the properties right now that are selling this caliber, they're like in the 1.23 range, like, that's where you have to be. And if the loss is the loss. And then she said, well, I have to fight. See the fight mode? I said, I get it, but how long will it take if the property keeps rising at 5 to 7%, or even call it 10%, to reach back the value where it needs to be in your head, which is 178 million or whatever, right? Said, well, at that pace, we're probably looking at like 5 years out, 7 years out, who knows? I said, well, what will happen if you don't sell? He said, well, I'm going to go bankrupt. Belly up. I'm finished. I'm done. I cannot afford it. I said, and you're still fighting and hoping that the market, that someone, that a lightning is going to hit from the sky and fix only your problem. It's not going to happen, right? And I show her the cases in Markland Woods, clients that we sold at, I think, 139 back in the day. Then the properties fell even more, and I've seen similar products sell for 129, 125, right? And the property that they bought in the peak was near 2 million bucks. So in their head, they're like, oh, look, I lost $500,000, but then they took the flight mode and they lost whatever they lost, but they could have lost $700,000. You see what I'm saying? It's not whether you're going to lose or not. The question here is, where can you lose less, like less impacted? So I think it is very interesting. We will go through an interesting period where people in the outskirts, especially like Grand Bend, like Niagara Falls, Collingwood area, Barrie area, Ajax, and all these little pockets, Kingston, we will see more dramatic falls. And then within the city, we will see more drama, because people will not be able to sustain themselves. And now, since the World Cup is gone and all of that stuff, it is what it is. I mean, congratulations to the Spanish people and the country of Spain. I mean, phenomenal. You guys won the World Cup. But I mean, like, look, it is what it is. Like I don't think people will stick around, buy a return ticket to Canada, and buy out the entire continent just because they loved it or anything like that. So we'll see what's going to happen. I think we're definitely years out before we see a solid return on an investment and a solid return in our economy. So stay tuned. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll definitely see you in the next one.